Okay, are we live? Yes, we are live. As always, greetings to all my followers of darkness, shadow scavengers, and villain aficionados. Welcome again, bienvenue to one of my good old fashioned, finally returning after 2 weeks of absence, villains review episode. And today, this is a villain I wanted to discuss for a very long time. Ever since I've seen all the three movies, especially the last one, Glass. We just with the name of the title, you can I think like you guys can kind of get the idea of which villain I'm going to talk about today. I have the pleasure and the honor to talk about Elijah Price, also known as Mr. Glass, the villain who is played magnificently in the Unbreakable movie and Glass movie by, of course, none other than one of the meanest, toughest, badass motherfuckers in the industry, Samuel L. Jackson. I mean, like, his portrayal of that character was absolutely amazing. Now, of course, as I mentioned before, he is the main villain of the how did the Shyamalan call it? Like East Trail 177 film trilogy. Like he was the main villain of the first movie, Unbreakable. He was kind of like the shadowy, overarching villain of the Horde. I mean, you haven't seen him appear, but like everything that was happening was kind of like plotting from the shadows from him, and then of course him alongside the Horde. He was like one of the main villains in Glass. And man, like again, I'm telling you, like he is one of those villains that really got my attention. Like he's all I would even say that he's one of those villains that I would even consider him when it comes to like in fiction is like one of the most iconic ones I've ever seen. I mean, of course, who cannot forget the Unbreakable meme picture with him holding the comic book? I mean, like who can forget that? But anyway, let's dial into this character, shall we? So, of course, as always, we're gonna start with the origin story. Now, the origin story is kind of like very simple, but in the same time also a little bit like tragic. Like for example, like in the I think like if I remember correctly from the movie Unbreakable, he was born in the early '60s, and basically ever since he was born he had like he was born like with broken bones basically, which kind of resulted in a rare genetic disease that kind of makes his bones like basically as delicate as glass. Like basically if you like touch him, his shoulder or a little finger or a little bit of his leg, his bones will break. like basically like nothing. Or as like one of the Horde's personalities, is it true, that your bones are so delicate if I just a bit tap them, they will break? Is that true? Like, I mean, the way how the Horde was portrayed by James McAvoy was absolutely brilliant. But anyway, going back to the origin story of Mr. Glass. So basically, like I said, he was born in a hospital with a rare genetic disease disorder, basically making his bones, very very delicate, easy to break. And most of it, like, his entire life, he was living, locked in his house, because he was afraid that, no matter what he does, his bones will break, which kind of like, also created his obsession with comic books, because, literally, even though his mother wanted to see him, go outside, play with the other children, what she does, what she did basically, she was starting to kind of like, buying comic books, over and over again, to have something to read. But I do love, just kind of like, other than movie going review, movie going view, like I love that scene where basically she bought him a comic book, she left him on the playground, which is kind of like across his house, and she's like, hey, I bought you a present. Why don't you go outside? It's over there on that bench, like, like just go and get it. And he was like afraid, like he didn't want to do shit basically. And then he comes out somehow, he survived and everything, and then boom, he opened the package and it was a comic book, which kind of like again it started his overall hobby slash obsession, studying of the comic books art basically, which kind of like also is part of the overall creation of the Mr. Glass character. Even though basically that's also a name that kind of like the other kids were calling him because like how fragile he was and everything. So overall, the origin story was very simple, but still the road, the way how he became Mr. Glass was like still like very fascinating. Because it wasn't like, even though yes he was born um, with delicate like bones, basically, with a rare genetic disease that I mentioned, like for the third or fourth time, you know, like it wasn't like his origin story overall. It wasn't something. Some people might disagree with me, but like I would say his origin story wasn't. It's not like deep, like tragic or dark or like like for example somebody betrayed him or somebody ruined his life, like or something like terrible happened to him across like his young life and everything. Like basically like ever since he was born, even though at the beginning you kind of see he was afraid of like for who he was and the condition he had and everything, across his life you could kind of see that he kind of like embraced who he was, and the kind of a problem he had and everything, which is something very rare that villains do. So overall, when going back to the origin story, very simple, but the steps, the way how it was building up to the Mr. Glass identity, still like very fascinating. A very fascinating road to villainy indeed. Now, of course, as the villain himself, like I said, if you're gonna have to put Mr. Glass, like if you in which category would you put him as a villain, basically? With everything that happened through Unbreakable and Glass movie, he basically, now first and foremost, he is a mastermind. He's basically an evil or criminal mastermind. It's your pick. Who basically is one of those villains that plots everything in the shadows. A mastermind that is always like a few steps ahead of like of the hero, basically. Even sometimes you have masterminds who are even responsible for the creation of the main hero. If it comes to like the whole like identity and superpower thing, which of course with Mr. Glass, that's the exact case. But not just really him being a mastermind, I wouldn't go as far as say he's like an obsessive mastermind, because like of his overall fascination with not simply comic books, but also in the same time, like with a high level intellect, also like the way how he's obsessed, with like superheroes and supervillains, the way how he sees not just simply that those kind of people could actually exist, but also in the same time, the way how he believes. I love that scene where Bruce Willis' character and his son met with Mr. Glass in the museum, where basically he explained that because of a very long time while he was reading comic books ever since he was at a very young age, he started to study them. He started to he started to kind of like believing that the comic books, just like those old paintings in ancient history, done on walls and everything, from like ancient civilizations, he believes that comic books are basically another example of those like ancient paintings, basically, kind of like explaining that somewhere somehow things that happen in the comic books actually happen in real life, which kind of, again, going back to the point that it makes you believe that actual superheroes and supervillains exist, they're not just simply like pure fiction. Now, of course, the way how the movies are done and everything, like, of course, we're not talking like Superman level superheroes, or like Omni-Man or Homelander's level of supervillains. Like, we're not talking about like those kind of super people, basically. We're talking like people with extraordinary abilities, but at the same time a little bit more realistic, basically. And one of the things I also have to mention, kind of like from my own point, is that since my favorite color is purple, I just have to say, like, I love his style. Or when it comes to like from the trousers, the shoes, the purple coat, like like I would say Mr. Glass, like this guy, he has style. Now, one of the other things that kind of fascinated me about it, which I mentioned at the very beginning, is that he is a villain that is always trying to be a few steps ahead, without the hero even noticing that, they were, that they were basically behind under certain actions. Like in this case, the creation of Bruce Willis's character and the creation of the Horde's character, basically, like which kind of goes all the way to the train crash, basically, and the way, and again, with the revelations and everything, how it was revealed, it was just simply like, done in a really, really, really good way, because, and also one of the things I love about it, which kind of makes him, for who he is, like a criminal mastermind, which is, of course, that each and every, which of course is one of the most sacred rules when it comes to villainy, especially masterminds in this case, that an evil mastermind would never reveal their plans. I'm going to talk about like the villain's goal a little bit later about when it comes to Mr. Glass, but I just want to mention that, like, usually criminal masterminds, they don't reveal their actual plans. They always have plan B or C or D, or even like plans that are kind of like a diversion that will basically make the hero like try to watch in a different direction, try to find some clues or culprits or whatever, that basically leads nowhere, like in which in the end the hero will think like, okay, we won, we solved the day and everything, but in reality they thought they won the battle, but in reality they have lost the battle, because during that time the criminal mastermind, they completed their mission, their plans, their goal, or whatever, while, basically, the hero was chasing squirrels, in a sort of way, or even chasing a ghost, you get the point, and that's exactly what Mr. Glass is. I mean, the way how he's villain, I mean, as a villain, the way how he fooled a lot of people, from, like I said, from the Horde, from, Bruce Willis's character, the Overseer, or even like the evil psychiatrist who was part of that, like four-leaf clover kind of like an organization. I mean, he is a villain, I would say this, with multiple talents. And of course, when I say multiple talents, it all goes to his mind, which of course, it leads me to, of course, talk about like, his strengths and weaknesses. Now, usually when you have criminal masterminds, of course, sure, you have somebody who can also have like, physical skills when it comes to like combat and everything. In like Mr. Glass's case, like, everything, which is also kind of a thing, even like, with another type of villain, which of course, is a mad scientist. In Mr. Glass's case, everything goes to his mind. All the strengths, all the like, the gifts and superpowers and skills and abilities, everything goes in his mind, because since he's frail, he's like, well, the Unbreakable at the beginning, he was limping, but then like later on he went in a wheelchair, like basically, like, he's a villain who has a very fragile body. Let's just put it this way, so everything that we have seen throughout these movies, everything it was going towards his mind, which kind of, when it comes to overall his skill, I mean, the man has superhuman intelligence. Let's just put it that way. Like, he is literally in that kind of world. He's literally one of the smartest person in the world. I'm not gonna say the smartest, but I would definitely think he's like one of the smartest people in the world. Now, one of the other things, that I have to congratulate when it comes to like, when it comes to his strengths is, of course, the guy has charisma, like astounding, like, perfect memory. He's a master manipulator. He, like, also he kind of showed throughout these actions that he's an kind of like an expert when it comes to like, explosives and like, overall mechanical sabotage. And also, like I mentioned before, he's extended like knowledge of comic books, which kind of made him, who he is. Now, with that being said, and again, all those give him like a big plus. But of course, we cannot ignore the weaknesses, which of course, in this case, is himself. Because since I've said he's a villain, has a fragile body, so basically everything that makes him who he is literally in his mind. That also makes his body the target. Because, like, like I said, one false move, boom, his bones will crack. Because of the rare genetic disorder that he had and everything. So when it comes to his overall weaknesses, like I said, when it comes to like, he doesn't particularly have like normal, traditional like type of villain weaknesses. because for what I've seen from the movies and everything, like, he's not a man who proved himself to be, very egotistical. He didn't prove himself to be arrogant. He didn't prove himself, to be selfish or self-absorbed or God wannabe or like, greedy or a tyrant or a jerk. Basically, like, he is one of those villains that at first point of view you might think like, is pure, like, the guy has no weaknesses, you know which of course, mostly are like, mental weaknesses, or like, the character himself's weaknesses, basically. But in this case, when it comes to Mr. Glass, his overall body is the weakness, basically. Which of course, it's not the first time I'm seeing like villains in fiction that basically where like their brain is like, the greatest weapon, but they have like, very delicate body. If it's like, like I said, a genetic disorder, or it's like they're like on life support, or they're like, in a cybernetic body, or they're like, in a capsule, like, swimming in liquids and everything, but they're kind of like, operating through different machines or telepathy or whatever. Like, there's been a lot of villains in fiction I've seen that basically have the same problem, where basically their own body, themselves, being the main weaknesses. So that's one of the reasons why usually when you have those types of villains, they usually always operate from the shadows, somewhere where basically they have a high chance the heroes will never reach them. Now in Mr. Glass's case, that's also not the case, because he was literally present the whole time, like, with everything that was happening around them, and like, he wasn't trying to hide himself and everything, even though he was kind of like, this kind of like master puppeteer, operating everything from like, one single place. So in the end, to basically not trying to repeat myself, the overall conclusion when it comes to his weaknesses, of course, is his own body. Now, villains' goals. Now, one of the things that I always said, you have like old school, classic villain goals. You have stereotypical goals. You have traditional goals. But at the same time, you have creative goals. You have unique villain goals. You have villain goals that are like logical, basically. They're kind of like, they're done in a way that, basically someone is like a lot of like viewers or readers or like, have never seen before, basically. And with Mr. Glass, that's actually the case, because like when it comes to Mr. Glass's character, like, he has two goals, basically, which of course is one of them is, like I said, being obsessed with superhumans, which of course, is locate and identify like, other superhumans, basically, in which case thereby basically justifying his overall existence, because he's one of those villains that is trying to find its place in society. He's trying to find his place in this world. He's trying to see himself, or should I say, he's trying to find a purpose of his own existence, basically. Like, what kind of a role does he have? Why he was put on Earth. What was the reasoning behind it? So that's one of the reasons why there also goes the creation of the Horde, and the Overseer. To kind of like basically, like I said, he always saw himself as a villain, as a super villain. And one of the other things that he also wanted to find is, of course, is an arch nemesis, which of course in this case was the Overseer. He was kind of like his overall arch nemesis. And as I mentioned before, he was also trying to find the villains, which of course we go to the Horde, in this case. So that's one of the goals. But the other goal is, which of course it's a goal that it's also it's like very creative. You can see the logic, but at the same time it serves the purpose of like of his own character, which of course is trying to expose the world that those kind of people like him, like him, the Horde and the Overseer actually exist. That they're like that somewhere out there are people with special skills. Something that, for example, that female psychiatrist in the Glass movie was trying to stop from happening. and she felt like, the only way to do it is, of course, if those three characters, they die, basically. So that way, we keep those kind of existence basically a secret. But of course, with Mr. Glass's case, he's like, you thought I was doing one thing, but I actually was doing the other. Like, for example, the way, the way how he planned everything in Glass. Like, the Unbreakable and the Horde were basically kind of like, the first, the Unbreakable was kind of like, let's just put it this way. When you see the movies, you think like Mr. Glass's goal had like 3 stages. Like, trying to create the Overseer is kind of like the first stage. And also trying to create the Horde. Then seeing the Horde in action, everything would happen in Split, you can kind of say it was kind of like the second stage of his plan. And then you have in the Glass movie, which of course is the third stage. Now at first we all believed that his goal was basically try to break with the Horde out of the asylum and basically go into on top of the tower. This, like, I think it was like a TV central station or something, and basically try to basically show the world who we are, who they are, and everything. But all of that, as I mentioned before, every single criminal mastermind has a diversion, as a like plan B or C, and that all along was Mr. Glass's plan B. It wasn't his overall goal. No. His overall goal, which that's why I said he is one of those villains that like basically fooled literally everyone. And that is that he was trying to tape through the security cameras, like everything that was happening outside the hospital. All the fights where people can see the Horde, they can see the Overseer, they can see their abilities, what they were capable of doing, and basically spread it throughout, all social media. But also, at the same time, without them knowing, he also even used the girl, the Overseer's son, and of course his own mother. Now, one of the other things I kind of mentioned, I want to go back to strengths and weaknesses. Now, one of the other things that kind of goes into, what I was trying to say, that he was trying to find himself. He's trying to also prove himself at the same time. Mr. Glass, I mean, again, not in a very typical way, but you can kind of feel that he also has some like mother issues as well, because of some of the conversations they had and everything, you kind of feel like, he was also trying to prove to her, that he could be somebody, that he is someone special, that he was going to do great things. So you can kind of also, think inside your head that that he might have some at a certain level some like mother issues as well. But again, very light, very soft. It's not those like one of those typical mother issues, but like just a little glimpses of it and everything. I'm telling you, like this villain, like Mr. Glass, like he's one of those villains that we call one of a kind, because like besides his body, you could kind of feel like he was one of those villains that was flawless. Like, I mean, okay, because usually, okay, I will say this again, going back to the strengths and weaknesses. Now, when you have usually criminal masterminds, in this case, like when when you usually have these kinds of villains, usually their main weaknesses are usually if you throw something at them that they can control or can anticipate, basically. So I think like if you're gonna look through the layers of Glass movie, basically you can kind of feel like okay, his overall downfall wasn't just simply his body, but also at the same time the girl and everyone else they were trying to throw things at him that he cannot control or anticipate, basically. Like, for example, when they show the truth about what Elijah did, with when it comes to the creation of the Horde, or even basically who the psychiatrist was, and everything. So this kind of goes in those kind of commentary when it comes to one of the other weaknesses of like Mr. Glass is basically if you throw something at him that he can't control or can anticipate, which again, it's usually a very traditional weakness, or should I say, instrument that is used against criminal masterminds. I mean, like one of the biggest examples, of course, is Grand Admiral Thrawn from Star Wars. I mean, if for example, if you have read like the Thrawn trilogy, or if you watch like Star Wars Rebels, like season 3 and 4, like that's kind of goes with him the same. It kind of goes the same thing with him, you know. But besides that, which again, with the way how he was written as a villain, like it's something that you can also like how can I put the word? It is something like you might think like it's kind of like not that big of a negative in a way, but also at the same time you can try to balance it as well, like because like the way I'm seeing, and I mean I watched this trilogy like over and over, like many times, and Mr. Glass even today still surprises me. Like like literally, he is one of a kind villain. Like he is literally in that category where you can put him like as more like one of those one of a kind villains for sure. Which kind of also leads me in the end the overall rating. Besides having the usual traditional weaknesses, not anticipating, not controlling, his overall body, there's a lot of stuff in his character that made me give him an 8.5 out of 10 shadows. Although personally, to kind of make him a little bit interesting but also honest, the reason why I give him a 0.5 is because it's Samuel L. Jackson. The way how you portray them. But those at the same time, there are so many other things that almost made him a complete, perfect villain. Basically, there are so many things that almost made him go there. Like for example, the way how he stood, like he was like like he was kind of like deep coma throughout the hospital, like all these years until the perfect time came for him to finally show his true colors. Like that was impressive. That was really impressive. The way how he mentored the Overseer, at the same time manipulated him. The way he manipulated the Horde to try to do his own biddings. Like, that is very impressive. That is very impressive. And that is why, and also, not to mention his overall obsession with the comic books and the overall point of view that you have with them and everything. And also trying to be a few steps ahead of the hero and almost everyone else. Mr. Glass, in the end, deserves an 8.5 out of 10. For sure. Definitely. Oh, man. Like I told you, like this is like a really interesting conversation. Oof. Like this is another very interesting conversation. Sorry, I was trying to say that I told you like this would be a very interesting villain to talk about. Oof. Ooh, that was a really nice chat. And with all that being said, I mean, there's a lot of things I can add. Also, it's a little bit on the nose, but like I really like, that he was, since he loved comic books. I really like that he was like a owner of a comic book store. That's also, I have to admit, like that was also pretty cool. To have like a character like him, also at the same time, which also kind of makes him in a way. I forgot to mention that, which only kind of goes to the reason why I gave him that higher score, is that Mr. Glass in the end, if you look at it, not only that he is an art aficionado or he has high level superhuman intellect, but also at the same time, in the end, if you look at him closely, the guy is a geek. The guy is a nerd, just like all of us, And I always said it. One of the types of villains who are always one of the most dangerous ones are, of course, the ones who are always geeks. These are the ones that usually are one of those types of villains that are like one of the most dangerous ones when it comes to like in all of fiction. Because I always said the villains who are always the most dangerous are either the ones who fear nothing, the ones who see themselves as the heroes of their own stories, the ones also they have nothing to lose, but also the ones who were in their youth geeks, like Syndrome, for example, from the Incredibles. But basically, those for me were always the 4 categories of like the most dangerous villains in fiction, and Mr. Glass is definitely in that, in those like categories as a geek. But overall, guys, here I am. I'm done. I hope you guys have enjoyed this villains review discussion about Mr. Glass. Like always, you guys know the drill. Rate the video, comment, subscribe, Give me give me your overall personal thoughts. What you thought about like the about the like the trilogy? What you thought about like the Mr. Glasses character? Like everything about those movies in general or the character himself. Put it in the comment section down below. Also, if you want to see any previous episodes of the Villains Review Season 2 or Season 1, they're going to be in the video description down below as well. And without any further ado, stay tuned for more. And until then, like always, Lord of Shadows, signing off. See you guys next time, or as I like to say, later, fuckers.